Joining us on the stage is Concordia's Hanne Dalmut.
President Duque, I'm going to start by, as an Iowan, thanking you for including a Field of Dreams quote into your 16-point plan. That meant a lot to me backstage.
I hope Kevin Costner also feels the same.
We'll get him up here next year. I want to use this conversation to really drill into the Concordia Amazonas initiative and what's being built. But before we get to that, much of your 16-point plan has a special role for the private sector. And I want to hear your thoughts or your response when people are critical as to the role of the private sector in this, and whether it's greenwashing, what the role of mis and disinformation is on this, and how we can truly engage the private sector as a good corporate actor.
So maybe my response will be in three ideas. Mm-hmm. The first one is there's not going to be a solution to the climate crisis we face without a leadership role of the private sector. We require that the private sector is in a leadership role, and that also implies that the private sector does two things that I just mentioned. One is that all of the private sector companies need to define a plan so that they meet their own targets, reducing their emissions on an annual basis.
And you mean this as all industries, right?
All industries. There are some industries that are obviously green and they have negative carbon footprint, but I'm saying industries need to reduce their emissions, but also they can continue to buy offsets. Mm-hmm. So if you just keep on emitting what you're emitting and you just buy the offsets, well, that's greenwashing. But if you reduce your footprint and at the same time you enhance the carbon credit market by buying the offsets, you're doing two very important actions that contribute to have a greener world. And the third element that I consider has to be part of this discussion is the accounting principles for carbon credits. So far the carbon credits have been a very important solution, but I also believe the accounting practices can be improved. There's a great work that has been done now by Professor Karthik Ramana in the University of Oxford under a nonprofit institute called the E-Liability Institute, proposing an improvement of carbon accounting over the next years. And I think that can work as Basel worked for the banking industry. You can have a ladder where you keep on improving until you get to the right place, to ideal place in terms of regulation so that there's full traceability on the accounting of a carbon credit.
In your conversations with industry leaders, and I know you've been speaking about this immensely with different sectors to include the energy sector, how much is that accountability or just the nebulous nature of the accounting process in the carbon credit world? How much is that a barrier that they're currently working with?
Well, I've seen that in some places there has been bad press against the carbon credits. And I have to praise the carbon credits for three things. One, they have been there for quite some time. They have been demonstrating that through a voluntary market, you can mobilize massively resources to projects that are aiming to solve the climate crisis in a specific countries, and that has a merit. Mm-hmm. But also, I believe that there has been some cases where there has been maybe overcommitment on the offsets. Now, does that make the market a flawed market? No. I believe that we can improve it, and we can use smarter accounting in order not to have double counting over the years. But I believe that that has to happen on a ladder type of work. And I'm certain that the carbon credit market will continue to grow. In fact, this year will be about the billions of dollars. We're seeing more companies wanting to buy the credits, and we see something that is very nice in terms of conservation, specifically on projects that are aimed to protect the Amazon, recover the land of the Amazon, and recover with the right kind of trees the areas that have been lost. I definitely see a very clear accounting and a very traceable way of putting the resources, planting the trees and getting the offsets in a time frame of 3 to 4 years. So I believe those elements of success have to be replicated, have to be escalated, and they can definitely generate a very important flow of resources for rural communities, specifically in the Amazon.
Great. Now, you mentioned the Amazon, and earlier, or as you closed your 16-point plan, you spoke about the Concordia Amazonas initiative. Much of your presentation showcased the progress being made in Colombia, but what we're actually doing is taking a group of individuals to Ecuador in July. Can you share a little bit about that?
So, what we try to use in the case of Colombia in some of the elements that we showcased today is that this is possible, and Ecuador is doing a very important work today. President Lasso is highly committed to this agenda, and with the event that we're having in July, with the retreat, with the Amazonic retreat, the Amazonic gathering of Concordia, we want to bring the brighter minds from the environmental world to work with corporate leaders of civil society, and identify solutions for the Amazon, while at the same time we're having this very important exchange with nature and with indigenous communities. And as we have said with Matt Swift, there's no four seasons treatment. We're all going to be in the rough Amazonic environment, but being able to leave aside any of our titles and be able to collaborate in a Concordia way to identify the solutions. Now, which kind of solutions? So for example, here we have representatives of companies like Walmart. How can, for example, Walmart contribute to have an aggregated value chain in the Amazon? There are a lot of Amazonic products that can be bought and be integrated into aggregated value chain and generate a sustainable way of living for indigenous communities, while not having the incentive of use illegal wood as a source of income, but instead protecting the environment and be able to sell a product that can be sustainably grown. Another element is tourism. We have here members of different tourism chains around the world. You can do a lot of ecotourism response working with indigenous communities, and that's also a way of conserving. But at the same time, here we have AI companies who are here in the crowd, and AI can be instrumental to identify where are in the hotspots of the Amazon illegally yellow machinery that is being used to deteriorate the environment. We also want the yellow machinery companies that are here, that are committed to the protection of the Amazon, to use AI technologies to identify the negative use of yellow machinery and try to use technology mechanisms to make it not functional if they are in hotspots. And maybe last but not least, which is another solution that we can bring to the table, is how, for example, we can use agroforestry in some parts of the Amazon that has the possibility of agricultural use, and how, for example, we can change the way in which legal cattle works in the Amazon region by having higher rotation, less amount of land, and using also silvopastures to capture the carbon dioxide. So I think these kinds of elements are the things that can be built. The Amazon has almost 50 million people, and we have to find solutions that bring a sustainable living for them, but also having a leadership role when it comes to be carbon negative.
Great. President Duque, thank you so much for your leadership and the Socratic method of calling on our audience in such a targeted way to, to get involved in this initiative and its forward-looking efforts. So thank you for this conversation, again, your leadership and this opportunity for July.
Thank you so much. Thank you.